Dear ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the webinar in the event of a disaster floods, organized by the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, IFLA, Preservation and Conservation Section and Rare Books and Special Collections Section. I'm Jasna Malešič, and I will be moderating this event. I work as a conservation scientist in the research department of the National and University Library of Slovenia, and am a member of the IFLA Standing Committee for Preservation and Conservation. The choice of hosting this event in Slovenia is not coincidental. Perhaps you are aware that Slovenia recently witnessed the worst natural disaster in its history, affecting 2/3 of its territory. The flood damage also severely impacted cultural heritage. Unfortunately, events of disaster are becoming our new reality, and we are increasingly forced to prepare, react, and recover from the devastating forces of nature. The primary aim of this webinar is to equip ourselves with the necessary knowledge to effectively handle potential future disasters. I am delighted to announce that we have leading experts in the field who will be presenting their work at this webinar. Hopefully, this webinar will be followed in the future by more sessions organized by IFLA covering all major disasters. 300 participants from different countries around the world have registered for the webinar, and due to great interest, we have decided to stream the event on YouTube, and we are recording it as well. The link to the recording will be shared on the event's website. So now, to ensure everything runs smoothly, I would like to ask you to follow these guidelines. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the question and answers box, which you can find in the Zoom toolbar. Do not forget to mention to whom the question is addressed. And for those following us on YouTube, you can post your questions in the comment section. We will address these questions at the end of the webinar. And feel free to leave your cameras on and off, whichever you prefer. So if you accidentally drop out of the meeting, use the link you received yesterday to join back in. And now it is my great honor to introduce our first speaker for today, Matevž Vidmar, who is State Secretary at the Ministry of Culture of Republic of Slovenia. And without further ado, I will pass this virtual floor to Matevž Vidmar. Please, Matevž.
Thank you. The floor is yours. Thank you. Dear organizers, dear participants of today's event, it's a pleasure to be with you. And I would like to thank you for organizing this seminar on behalf of the Ministry of Culture of Slovenia. The topic of natural and other disasters affecting our heritage is of growing importance. And with the climate crisis, we are talking about heritage as risk in the broad sense of prevention and in the sense of response to sudden weather events, which we all know are caused by man's actions on the planet in many cases. As you know, and as Ms. Malešič mentioned before, much of Slovenia was hit by weather disasters last summer. From July's extreme winds to the devastating floods in August, and even in spring, there were many landslides and heavy rain. Many families lost their homes, roads and paths were washed away, links to settlements were severed, public infrastructure was damaged in a great way, cultural monuments affected, buildings and their surroundings flooded or endangered by landslides. There were some positive stories during these events, though, showing the role of communities and the cohesive power of culture, especially in small local environments. Also, the examples of libraries resonated, where people responded to the request to rescue materials, to help with the flooded premises and to restore the situation as soon as possible. Also, during the field visits in the days after the event, mayors and local authorities put it on our hearts at the Ministry of Culture, not to forget culture, which also, in their opinion, was the binding element of their communities, and particularly in the hard times, it proved to be so. And the culture for them meant stability, hope, connection between individuals and groups, especially in these hard times, as I said. So already during the weather events, we have heard the warnings and the needs from the field, and we have immediately responded to them in different ways. And with the help of many colleagues at the ministry and with institutions linked to us. The first step was to gather information and provide assistance where the help of professional institutions and associations has been invaluable. Among other things, we have published recommendations on how to deal with the flooded books, photos, CDs, flooded objects of cultural heritage and other valuable items. This was user-friendly and immediately applicable. Secondly, we facilitated networking between institutions, including lending equipment and experts to respond to the immediate recovery. We offered emergency funding and amended our regular funding mechanism for this year in order to offer additional support to the affected institutions as much as possible. Finally, we helped developing the law on reconstruction and development after the consequences of floods. And we provided systemic support for investments in the coming years. This will hopefully give us the possibility to put up several storage facilities for the museum, archive, and other materials in the flooded areas. Libraries are undoubtedly among the cultural institutions at the heart of communities, providing access to materials in their well-designed and accessible physical spaces, complemented, of course, by online access and technology-enabled services. And at the same time, they connect and enable the development of reading culture that is the foundation for open, inclusive, and democratic societies. Similar to other cultural institutions, libraries are also facing an important paradigm shift brought about by the climate crisis. And in this context, cultural heritage is not only passively threatened in cases of disasters or conflicts, but it can be an active factor in adapting and building the resilience of today's societies. So it's not just about repairing the damage that occurs in the event of extreme events and the physical damage, but it's also about preparing and adapting to different situations that are coming to act in a preventive way. So we hope that we will also learn through this how we prepare for threats and how we act during and after natural disasters. We are aware that the best way to do this is to strengthen the capacities of individuals and the capacities of institutions, to exchange knowledge, to exchange experience, to share different examples of good practices, but also of bad practices that we can learn from. And alongside knowledge, of course, there is also openness, there is also connectedness and solidarity, which has been the hallmark of all those who have had to deal with the summer floods in Slovenia. And this really was a positive experience in that way. For today, I wish you all every success in your work, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Čelik, for your warm welcome, and of course, the Ministry of Culture for all the support. And now I would like to introduce to you to Ornella Foglieni, who is currently serving as IFLA Chair of the Preservation and Conservation section. Throughout her professional career, she dedicated her efforts to the Lombardia region, working in the sector of culture, specifically for libraries, archives, cultural institutions, and cultural heritage. So I'll now hand it over to Ornella Foglieni for her presentation. Ornella, please.
Good morning. Welcome everyone from Milan. I know that there are so many people attending this webinar. It's my first way that appear in this position as a chair. I was chairing in past time, but for short time, and now it's a very changed, difficult period for all problems, including disaster. Now, I want to thank you, the State Secretary of the Minister, who has honored us with his presence and his appreciated words addressed to the problem of caring of cultural heritage, in this case, libraries and archives, but in general, cultural heritage and service too, especially in this dramatic, increasingly frequently and widespread situation of loss of damage, irreparable or partially restorable historical documentary asset, testimonies with civilizational value. We know of his commitment toward the library context affected by recent catastrophic flood event. Here I have short time. I want to thank Jasna Malešič for briefly introducing me, and I'm pleased to open the first webinar 24, the Slovenian National Library. I also want to thank the staff of the library and the direction and all we work, I don't know in your language, I appreciate your efficiency. And I think that we have to speak about IFLA later, the two words about IFLA. IFLA, as you know, is a federative non-governmental organization of national association and various library institutions, but not only. There are also very often archives enclosed related to libraries, as also our museums, due to the various type of asset and collection managed in the territories, but also their documentary bibliographic asset. IFLA has been changing for several years. It evolved to meet or prevent the new needs of new users in the area of remote new librarians to be trained with complex multitasking, intersectorial, managerial, and digital skill, as well as strictly of the technical supply chain specific to the sectorial discipline and address it not only to the local community, but wherever and whoever they are or wherever they are, in different abilities, multicultural users anywhere in the world. IFLA makes use of its institutional and personal volunteer members of its complex organization in section and division and various committees, which will soon be 100-year-olds, and takes full care of the environmental cultural ecosystem in which it is located, taking into account emerging needs, promoting minimum standards, and good sustainable practice in terms of energy consumption and local resources, opportunities for education and updating of employees with many initiatives, totally online or hybrid like ours. Preservation and conservation is one of the oldest sections. I've been electing member this year, and now sensitively due to the greater responsibility associated with these functions as chair. There are rules, statutes, and tools for working as volunteer in coherent and standardized way, but not a given for all level of approach. The tool helps to facilitate planning, comparison, and frequent exchanges thanks to the internet, especially after the pandemic with the updated technical tools with a view to horizontal collaboration between sections and verticals with different levels, and deal with strategic aspects and relationship with the major institutions in the world, including at the political and economic level, such as the United Nations, and IFLA is on the table also. For many meetings, and research or non-profit technicians, and we've refined and standardized methodologies from the use of the advanced technologies available, and with a view to building and supporting strong networks of libraries, numerous even stable relationships of mutual assistance and help in case of emergency, and for training and updating of service as well. Diversity is a value and an opportunity, an important component of collaboration on broad cooperation, such as transparency and the need to maintain appropriate level of exchange to need of effective, manageable, inclusive, collaborative relationships between committed members, which can inspire and generate new ideas and projects for the library community in broad sense, but increasingly transversal and also to archives and museums. especially for the management of native digital and digitized material. What I show there is only an example of the website of IFLA. You can scroll and browse all bottom of this screen, these web pages, and you can find a lot of important sources and information for your work and to meet people everywhere in the world. Here are only designed such second screen you can find when you push, and I invite you to give a look sometimes, frequently, not every day, but about every day, because every day we have a lot of things to see, to know, and to understand. There are many changes over time in the organization. Now, the name of the preservation and conservation is PRESCONS, not a good sound, but now it's important to have an acronym. And in this initiative now, we have to speak on disaster, in particular floods. I want to remember that there is really also the opportunity to learn about other experience from European countries and beyond. You have also Italy has experience. In Italy, floods has become frequent and have occurred in various areas. Celine has been involved in that area, and we thank her again for her contribution to the review. She will report on, albeit briefly. The case of Emilia-Romagna region was presented in the speech by Elizabetta Zonca at the session of the Congress, in which other cases and good practice were the subject of the intervention. Both the satellite in Amsterdam and the conference session in Rotterdam has as the premise and framework the IFLA standard, now revised, to update them to the times, the analysis of the standard committee, and also involved PRESCONS session. On 24 August, we talk about Emilia-Romagna, and you have all important possibilities to recuperate the speech, the documents in the our repository, IFLA repository. I invite you to scroll and to browse the website and to go into the repository and to look around, and you can find a lot of information, sources about all activity of IFLA and our sections. I believe that you are many familiar, you became, if you are not, many familiar with the IFLA website, which is worth visiting often because this is very engaging in data collection and many initiatives. I remind you the Blue Shield, also in our contest, and the initiative of the UNESCO. You can, after have this speech about the other colleague. And I remind you that IFLA is important and for all people, and I invite you to join IFLA. And today's webinar, therefore, represents a sort of continuation for us, for our section, between 22 and 23 years on the topic of standard methodology for dealing disaster and drawing up and prepare emergency plan. At this year, week-long Congress PRESCONS organized the two-day workshop, as I told before. I invite you to find the documentation and the section concerning the disaster. I have also in my second sheet of the screen, this leaflet, the brochure done in 22 could be upgraded, but it's important because it describes the mission and the goal of our section, and they are the same, naturally upgraded. You can see also the other information about the ENSULIB now became a section, new section concerning green libraries and other kind of problem related to our new current problem on sustainability. So, the other screen, please. The other picture could be a particular of our section and possibility to visualize in which way what you can find in the repository. This is the third page of my abstract concerning the session presentation. This is the possibility to print the complete text of the speech and so on. Go on, please. In last speech, you can see a picture of the last day of Rotterdam Blik. The Blik is the conference we had this year. On next year, we have no conference, but we have other possible opportunity to meet in other meeting, maybe in Australia, also in hybrid form, I think. This is a group, mixed group, because it's the division F. This is the past finishing term of Chan. She's Chan. And now we have Vincent Boulet. And we start with a couple of years to work together with other sections as a library session, a library art session, rare book collection, and so on. We are 6, I think, and we have a meet on next week. I want to close my speech because I can't go in depth for this short time, and I want to invite you to follow our seminar, our initiative, our documents. Even we have to work a lot to upgrade our website. We are looking to have a position for info coordinator because it's very important in our time, the communication. And I hope to find someone volunteer, like we are all volunteers, to do this activity, because it's very important to communicate what we are doing. Even we can approach of not solving completely the problem, but give idea, give help or possibility to meet other people able to solve or to help to reduce risk in this case, or to prepare some good plan, good initiative, and practicing more in exercise concerning preparedness, emergency, and so on. It was my last activity in Regione Lombardia when Daniel Mincio started with Cosa d'Oca on this matter. It is very important to practice before that you have possible risk and flood in this case. But flood sometimes arrive suddenly, you can't imagine, or you can imagine, but it's not possible to stop it. And the problem is what to do during. We can see and we can hear after what they are doing in different countries today and what they did in case of situation, dramatic situation. After, to restore services, to restore books, to restart with all we can have damaged in this terrible natural or not natural situation caused by water. We want to continue in this line to have a series of possible new seminar or initiative in which in this country, with you, with other people, because I think everybody can appreciate the contribution of all over the world in different situations. Maybe the problem is the same, water is damaged paper, all kind of item in libraries, also digital. Digital is very, very difficult to be maintained also during this disaster, this special disaster. We have attack to digital. So our site could be damaged dramatically and we can miss, but cooperation is very important. So we invite you to imagine that our group is at your disposal to meet and to work together. Join IFLA. I want to invite you to come with us in this new way and to find the opportunity to do. And I wish you a good following of this seminar. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you very much, Ornella. And now I would like to present another IFLA representative, Claire McGuire. She is an officer on the policy and advocacy team at IFLA. She coordinates IFLA's work with UNESCO and oversees policy and advocacy related to culture, heritage, education, and climate action. So please, Claire, this virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you to both sections for convening this very important and timely webinar. And thank you to the ministry as well for your support. I want to leave a lot of space here for the experts to speak, but I thought it would be helpful to add a bit of context from the international perspective into what IFLA does around disasters at all stages. So IFLA's role in terms of disaster is really one of information sharing. So convening experts, bringing libraries to the international table, advocating for support, and advocating for the specific context of libraries and what they need in order to increase their ability to prepare, respond, and recover from disasters. So that's really our remit in this space. And as a partner of UNESCO, we're able to bring the voices of libraries really up to this international level. IFLA is also a founding member of Blue Shield International, which brings together museums, archives, monuments, and sites together with us from libraries. And that's another forum through which we can advocate for libraries to be included in a disaster response. So there's some specific challenges for libraries in particular, and archives to a certain extent as well, that IFLA works to raise awareness of at the international level. So firstly, within UNESCO, libraries can be a lot of different things, and they fall under a lot of different units. So we coordinate with the culture sector, also with the communications and information sector, and that's at times a challenge, especially when you look at the national level. Libraries may be under a different ministry. Our library is covered by the Ministry of Culture. In some countries, some libraries are under the Ministry of Culture, while other types of libraries are under a different ministry. So there's these sorts of challenges in terms of information sharing and coordination that IFLA, through its work at UNESCO, tries to solve through UNESCO's power as a convening body. Of course, information sharing is always a huge challenge, especially in crisis, and that's why it's so important to take steps before a crisis to ensure that information can be shared in the quickest and most efficient way. And finally, sort of aligning with the ministries, the question of where libraries fall within a national context, not all legislation that translates international cultural property protection conventions into national law covers libraries in a way that is similar to other sites, World Heritage sites, national heritage sites, major museums. So it's a good question to ask of how does your national legislation cover libraries and documentary heritage collections? So again, I wanted to take these moments to share what would be the most useful for us in our capacity as an information sharing body when disaster happens. So what we do from IFLA's perspective, we first reach out within our network. So that would be our association members, our institution members, our regional division committees, our members of standing committees in affected countries. We will start reaching out and asking for information. Credible reports, any sort of information we can get as to what sites, what libraries and collections have been affected. We will carry out desktop research. So looking into, okay, what key collections are in the affected area? What libraries are in the affected area where we might need to reach out proactively? Where has there been past cooperation? So for example, there's been a project between the British Library and institutions in Gaza to digitize cultural heritage, documentary heritage. So we look at what might already be digitized. We look at reports of damage on news sites from credible social media accounts. We gather all of this information and we provide reports to UNESCO, working with the Museums and Movable Heritage Unit, the Cultural Emergencies Unit, and the Documentary Heritage Unit. So for an example, in September of last year, there was quite a devastating flood in Libya. And it was very challenging because we didn't have contacts on the ground. So one example of what we could do is look at satellite imagery. So you can see in the red box on a before and after. Within the red box, we identified the Library of King Idris I, which was a brand new public library. And we can see that the library was still standing after the flood, but it was clearly in the damaged zone. So we could take that information to UNESCO and say, we know that there is this library. We need further efforts to assess damage to include this library in the damage assessment. But of course, that is, it's much more ideal for us to have information directly from the ground. So I would conclude with sharing a few tips of what you might do to work with us to help build this capacity to respond and bring library voices to the international level. So determine what authorities cover libraries in your country. You might already know this. Look into cultural property protection laws around trafficking, around libraries in crisis and armed conflict. Do they include libraries in the same way as they would include other heritage sites, or is there more advocacy needed? Catalog collections, take photos whenever possible, especially in terms of trafficking and theft. This is really critical. And then get in touch with us if a disaster happens, sharing key contacts. And one piece of information that is really critical for us to share with UNESCO, if there's a library affected and you know the latitude and longitude or the specific address, that information is so critical for us in order to bring this to the international level and help ensure that libraries are included in these broad efforts to recover from disaster. So that being said, that is a bit of context that I can give from IFLA headquarters, but there's a ton more work that can be done before disaster strikes to reduce risk. So I will end there and hand over to the experts to share more. So thank you again for inviting me to participate today, and I wish you all the best for the remainder of this webinar.
Thank you very much, Claire, for this update. And now really we will start with our presentation on floods. And we are very happy to have Celine Allain. She is an expert in conservation and emergency preparedness, coordinating emergency response at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. She initiated and coordinated the drafting of ISO standard on information and documentation for emergency preparedness and response. Additionally, she participated in the revision of several standards in the conservation field. Celine will present 2 times today, and now she will start with important international standards and guidelines related to emergency preparedness. Please, Celine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jasna, and thank you, IFLA, for your invitation. I'm really grateful too for the Ministry of Culture for the organization of this seminar. So my presentation now will focus on the adaptation effort during the process of revision of IFLA's manual on emergency preparedness and planning towards more pragmatism and to make this standard more usable in libraries of all type and all size around the world. We wanted this manual to provide libraries with new tools to help them implement their own emergency policies and procedures. During the last decade, the need to respond to various emergencies, such as natural disasters and conflicts, has increased in libraries, museums, and archives. Most disasters are natural disasters, such as tornadoes, wildfires, hurricanes, and floods. Some natural disasters can be predicted, such as hurricanes or severe storms, while others happen with very little or no warning. Some disasters are the cause of human actions, intentional or unintentional. Regardless of the type of disaster, there are things that we can do to prepare. Since emergencies often evolve rapidly and become too complex for effective improvisation, a library can successfully plan in advance of a disaster event. The aim of emergency response preparedness is to optimize the speed and the volume of support to cultural assets delivered preventively or even after an event. It provides practical guidelines to operators when they prepare to respond with appropriate means and organization. Written heritage in times of crisis is very sensible very fragile too. It is very difficult to trace library items and to identify possible lootings. In case of, there are lots of damages that rapidly occur on library items, and consequences can be very dramatic. Cultural heritage is charged with multiple values: historical, sentimental, artistical, religious, scientist, or economical. Cultural heritage also empowers people and communities with a feeling of continuity when a disaster strikes. But in an emergency situation, the first priority for the civil defense or a fire brigade is human safety. While written heritage requires a very rapid intervention, its safeguarding may not be feasible in a crisis situation. It may not be possible to proceed to cultural heritage evacuation and stabilization in the course of human rescue and disaster control. So it is the responsibility of the command of crisis operations to decide according to the ongoing situation for the safeguarding of cultural assets. So many factors might interfere during the evacuation in the decision of evacuation and protection of cultural property. There might not be, so cultural heritage might not be the first priority. Looting during civil disturbance is construed as a message of protest against the conditions that facilitated the civil disturbance in first. Looting also after disasters is not a myth. It is a well-documented phenomenon, and we have examples, for instance, after the Katrina floodings in the United States. So challenges in the preparation phase are very critical. It is very important to be prepared, and in the same time, it is very libraries face several challenges when they try to start drafting their emergency plan, especially the drafting of an emergency plan is time consuming, and it can be very difficult to sustain after it has been validated. Libraries can face many different hazards and threats, and the staff in charge of the plan doesn't always have access to the required information for the drafting of the plan. We have noticed that a lot of plans do not address specific operational issues. There are a lot of plans are very narrative, they are very wordy, and they are not adapted to an emergency situation. Or in some cases, instructions are very general and not adapted to the ongoing situation, or are not useful or they are not helpful to guide the organization of the teams on the ground. Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction recommends to promoting the development of quality standards, such as certifications and awards for disaster risk management, with the participation of the private sector, the civil society, professional associations, scientific organizations, and of course the United Nations. So a standards-based approach to emergency preparedness enables libraries to benefit from the knowledge and experience of the wide range of best practices to draft their own plan and procedures. Standards are published documents based on accepted best practices. They create methods and requirements, and they provide a low-cost effective way for libraries to access and to use the knowledge gained over time by organizations in different contexts. So the documentation is really abundant in this field, but there are three main standards that I would like to discuss with you today. The ISO 21110, leaflets drafted by ICROM, and of course the IFLA the brief manual drafted by IFLA in 2006. These standards are very different, although they focus on emergency preparedness and recovery for cultural heritage. ISO standards was published in 2019. It is quite recent. It is made of two parts. The first part is methodological. It will address the usual aspects and of emergency preparedness and response. It is very detailed, but it is not prescriptive. It will not tell you what to do and how, but it will guide you in the process of drafting your plan and responding when an emergency occurs. The second part of this standard is very innovative in the cultural heritage sector. It is based on, it is actually a list of indicators of performance applied to our field. There are 12 indicators, and that you can see here on this slide, and these indicators are meant to help you identify what is the sector that you need to improve, and identify where you have already reached a good level of preparedness. So for instance, you have human exposure, awareness, training, the understanding of effects of risk on cultural heritage with different type of criteria, the provision of supplies, the assessment of the vulnerability of your holdings, the process of warning, the process of updating your plan, elements, criteria regarding your procedures, including also mitigation measures, and the involvement of the senior management in the preparation process and the recovery process. So this document is very useful. Maybe it is more adapted to libraries already involved and prepared in their in the emergency process of preparation. There is another guide that is very useful. It is all the documentation prepared by ICROM for museums, libraries, and archives. This ICROM has prepared guidelines and toolkits that are very concise, very easy to, very practical, and very didactical. But they are mostly usable for an ongoing disaster. They will guide you after an emergency has occurred and give you very practical recommendations to deal with the emergency. You can also use this documentation for educational purposes, to raise awareness, or to train your colleagues. IFLA standards is quite different. When IFLA's preservation and conservation section was requested to revise IFLA Disaster Preparedness and Planning Manual, a quick survey concluded that the document was still relevant almost 15 years after it was published in 2006. Besides being concise and straightforward, the manual seems complementary to this abundant documentation and very complementary to ISO standard and to ICROM's guidelines. The document has been experienced by several of the section members, and they concluded it was really a good introduction to disaster planning, in particular when initiating the drafting of a plan, and for small libraries with reduced staff and reduced time. But among the many pitfalls of the revision project was the overlapping with ISO standard recently issued in 2019, and also with ICROM's guidelines and toolkits. On the other hand, few libraries, having drafted their emergency preparedness and response plan, the revision of IFLA's manual could give an impetus to many libraries' effort to overcome this issue. So the revision of this standard is still in progress, and I would like to emphasize the need for standards and present the main orientations taken after the main orientations taken for the revision of this standard. So the revision of IFLA standard is guided by an adaptation effort to make standards more usable in libraries of all type and all sizes around the world, providing them with new tools to draft their own emergency policies and procedures in the preparedness phase. While the nature of events may differ significantly, preparedness to them may appears to have much in common in terms of information and skills required. With regard to small organizations, these standards provide inputs to simplify the preparation phase and the design of the safeguarding plan. So, as I said, the documentation regarding emergency preparedness is really abundant, and often the main issue is where to start. So we agreed that to prepare a matrix to help the readers understand the different levels of achievement of a standard, visualizing where to start and the steps of progression. Indeed, we realized that while few libraries have completed their emergency plan, a lot of information might already be available. For instance, the building plans or the phone book are information already available, and that can be added in your emergency planning. So we prepared a dashboard with 4 levels of achievement, with references to the corresponding sections in the standard. We agreed that this matrix would complement the standard instead of replacing it, providing a guide of implementation of the standard. So while the drafting of the ISO was based on performance and non-prescriptive principle, there still seems to be a need for more guidance, and especially for practical orientations for the preparation phase. Although the standardized template would be very useful, and very often libraries ask for a template to fulfill, there is a risk of focusing on the format rather than the content of the plan. So the revision of the IFLA standards tends to bring guidance in the drafting process, and the preparation of operational procedures that can be considered as the core of your plan. So this is it for this presentation, and I will be happy to answer your questions afterwards.
Thank you very much, Celine, for this interesting presentation. Well, we will address the questions in the answers and questions section. So please, we will continue with the program if you agree. And I would like to present our next speaker, Elena Pianea. She has been employed by Tuscany region since 2011. Initially, she served as the director of museums and eco-museums, overseeing the Tuscan Museum Network. Later, she was appointed head of cultural heritage, UNESCO sites, contemporary art and memory. And currently, she holds the position of director of cultural heritage, institutions, activities, and sport at the region of Tuscany. And now she will present to us lessons from recent 2023 floods in Tuscany region in Italy. So I'll now hand it over to Elena Pianea for her presentation. Please, Elena.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. And I thank you for the invitation to this prestigious conference. And so let's start. Okay, we show you this is the Tuscany region on the map of Italy to remind everyone where we are located now. So flooding in Tuscany on 2 November. On the evening of 2 November 2023, heavy and persistent rainfall caused by a self-regenerating storm system caused many watercourses to flood in northern Tuscany. Regional network rain gauges recorded over 200 millimeters of rainfall in 6 hours. The floodways caused levees to break and flooding in many towns in the provinces of Florence, Prato, Pistoia, Lucca, Pisa, and Livorno. Local authorities identified 8 victims, among who were caught in the flood waters both in buildings and on the streets. Motorways and railway lines were closed due to the flood damage, and several minor roads in mountainous areas were closed following landslides. The civil protection of region of Tuscany and municipalities was immediately deployed in rescue, relief, and recovery operations. On 3 November, a national emergency was declared. The president of the region of Tuscany, Eugenio Gianni, was appointed commissioner for the emergency with order 1037 of the president of the Council of Ministers in 5 November. In commissarial order 91 of 9 November, the president of the region of Tuscany outlined the first urgent civil protection interventions and identified the technical support structure of the commissioner, including my directorate. National legislation on library and archives emergency. The main reference standards for emergency situation are as follows. Legislative Decree number 42, Code of Cultural Heritage, the national law governing the protection of Italy's cultural and landscape heritage. Legislative Decree number 81 on the protection of health and safety in the workplace. Guidelines for the prevention of risks and the response to archives emergency. We can make this document, of course, available to all. Managing an emergency means learning how to improve the routine management of activities and service, and therefore learning how to prevent emergency by preparing emergency plans for cultural heritage, For example, the region of Tuscany, in cooperation with the Ministry of Culture, drew up an emergency plan for the Casa Siviero Regional Museum, located in Florence on the banks of the Arno River, to be implemented in the event of flooding. Damaged municipal libraries and archives. The following... Non funziona, come mai? Okay. The following figures may help understand the extent of the damage. The archival heritage of 26 municipalities, 1 province and 1 public hospital was damaged. 24 public archives for a total of approximately 3.5 linear kilometers of documental assets flooded and rescued by storage in freezers. Archive of the hospital in Prato for approximately 104 linear meters of medical records. The municipal library of Campi Bisenzio with approximately 53 of assets, 70,000 books destroyed. Activation of regional crisis unit. The actors involved. The regional crisis unit is the specialized civil protection decision-making body chaired by the president of the region and composed of the main official reference persons responsible for coordinating rescue and relief operations in the event of an emergency. Therefore, the regional crisis unit is only activated when an event occurs that causes serious harm to persons or things or affects a large proportion of the region. The task force that worked on cultural heritage and regional level consisted of Region Tuscany, our directorate, Regional Civil Protection Mobile Unit for Cultural Heritage, Archival and Bibliographic Soprintendenza, Supervisory Authority of Tuscany, part of the Ministry of Culture, Restoration Library of the National Central Library of Florence, part of the Ministry of Culture, Carabinieri Command for the Protection of Cultural Heritage. The Mobile Unit for Cultural Heritage. Tuscany is the first Italian region to specialize in interventions of safeguards works of art and cultural heritage in situation managed by the civil protection. In the event of floods, earthquakes and other emergency, the regional civil protection has a specialized operations unit for cultural heritage, which stores and relocates the affected works of art using special containers. Operations are coordinated by the regional civil protection with the participation of volunteers who have received specific training, including practice drills. Intervention procedures. In some municipalities, the salvage and securing of archival heritage was organized by the municipal authorities themselves, involving archive and library managers, as well as volunteers, known as mud angels. In other more heavily damaged areas, the recovery of flooded material was coordinated by the region of Tuscany and Civil Protection Authority. The latter through its mobile unit of cultural heritage together with the Ministry of Culture and Carabinieri Command. Action taken and criticalities. Time factor and lack of water. We promptly took action and salvaged archival material. We did not wash the documents before bagging and freezing them due to lack of time and especially due to lack of space and in some cases also lack of water. Finding boxes for transporting and storing archival material in freezers. The boxes available to the region of Tuscany Mobile Unit for Cultural Heritage were insufficient for the amount of material to be saved. Rufino, a major Tuscan winery, donated several large plastic storage bins, very generously and free of charge. Availability of containers for the cryopreservation of archival heritage. The region of Tuscany's mobile unit for the cultural heritage had 2 freezers, which is had purchased for use in case of an emergency. There was an urgent need to procure 4 more containers. We rented 3 through a spending procedure that was activated in 3 days. Pardon. And 1 container was offered free of charge by the frozen food company Brofrost. Donation of books during the emergency. The Library of Campi Bisenzio received many offers to donate books, but it rejected them temporarily, explaining that in an emergency, the priority is not rebuilding the book heritage, but is ensuring the public library service to the community. Administrative bureaucracy and emergency procedures. We have learned an important lesson we wish to pass on as a suggestion. Over-bureaucratization must be avoided in emergencies. Volunteering. Many volunteers traveled to the disaster sites in the days immediately following the flooding. These non-affiliated volunteers supported the civil protection in helping the local people. In the streets of the flooded towns and cities, people formed human chains, passing baskets to remove mud and water from houses, garages, and basements, or removing destroyed furniture and objects. People of all ages, including many young people and even children, shoveled mud, cleaned up, and helped as much as they could where on the official rescue and relief mechanism alone was not enough. Those whose experienced the 1966 flood in Florence or who have even only seen images from it cannot but think of these people as the new mud angels. The salving of cultural heritage benefited from the collaboration between affiliated volunteers and the mud angels. Estimated damage. It is time for reckoning, and the estimated damage is as follows. 8.5 million for the recovery of the archival heritage, prioritizing the historical assets. 5 million of damage to cultural heritage buildings, libraries, and archives. Cost for setting up and scattered temporary library in Campi Bisenzio. Ex post intervention, recovering the archival heritage and reconstructing the library of Campi. And the cost estimate the intervention to be carried on are as follows. For the archival heritage, drying using freeze drying, disinfecting and pressing. The restoration library of the National Central Library in Florence has 1 freeze drying machine. 2 restoration where needed. For the municipal library in Campi Bisenzio, scattered temporary library, several decentralized landing points scattered over the area with books collection for adults, children, and young people, the bookshelf at the Gonfienti Museum, the Children and Young People's Library in the theater, the book mobile with books of adults, libraries, and in supermarkets, also providing access to a digital newsstand. 2. A new library at Villa Rucellai, an ancient villa under restoration. The contribution of patronage. The network of Tuscan patrons has been active since the beginning of the emergency and consists of both municipal authorities and private individuals. Mobilization of individual municipal libraries and library networks with allocation of funds to the libraries of Quarrata and Campi Bisenzio. The University of Florence Museum Network launched a charitable initiative over the Christmas period. National Association of Italian Municipalities has allocated the funding to the municipal authorities. Unicoop Firenze, a supermarket chain, has taken steps to set up a library with a digitally newsstand in the supermarket in Campi Bisenzio. The Rofino Winery, which donated plastic storage bins, as already mentioned. The Bofrost Company provided the municipality of Montemurro with a freezer free of charge for 1 year. Conclusions. The flooding proved to be a very important experience, including for a human perspective. We are proud to have been able to help preserve the cultural heritage. We are aware that to take effective action in face of a crisis, the following must be organized in advance before the emergency. Intervention procedures, task force to be involved, sequence of necessary actions, drills to practice and perfect the emergency response as crucial. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very interesting and informative presentation. And we will go back now to Celine Allain with her second presentation. He will present to us floodings in Paris, the preparation plan of the National Library of France. Please, Celine.
Yes. The city of Paris is built along the river Seine. It comprises bridges, quays, and the banks of the Seine in the historic part of its course. The architecture and town planning are articulated along the river. The riverbank of the Seine, River is listed as the World Heritage by UNESCO. In this context, a large amount of cultural heritage is at risk in case of a flooding. In fact, Paris has been hit by 2 major floods recently in June 16 and January 18, which made the river rise above 6 meters high. This caliber of flooding occurs roughly every 20 years, and these episodes punctuate the city's history, as you can see on these slides. So the last major floods were this level, not the highest, and we are afraid to rise to reach this level, which is a level that is said to be reachable every 100 years. The historical rising that serves as a reference today is in fact the flooding of 1910 that reached 8 meters high. Meeting these recurrent threats, authorities have taken measures. There is a legal instrument. It is the Plan for Flood Risk Prevention that aims at reducing the sensibility of the stacks involved in the city. But it is after the flooding in Prague in 2002 that the Ministry of Culture imposed to all cultural institutions to have a plan in case of floodings. really this event in Prague was really striking for Paris, and it was really after this event that all institutions were obliged to have a prevention plan for the risk of floodings. So the National Library of France initiated its flood protection plan in 2003, indeed. And it was revised in 2007, but actually we completely have redrafted it in 2013, in 2015. The first step for us was to understand what would occur in case of a flooding. The Plan of Paris covers the prevention of flood damage from overflowing of the river with water surging at 1910 recorded levels, but other issues can occur, including flooding of the basement due to the rising of the groundwater tables. Water infiltrations are facilitated in this case by the porosity of the walls, the cables roots, and the pipes. We also have to prepare for flooding with sewage as a consequence of a burst pipe or the saturation of the drainage system, and also power shortage involving the loss of key functions, and as a result, the evacuation of the public and the staff members. There is another issue that we have to take into consideration. It is the fact that the staff will have a lot of difficulties in traveling inside the city. Another important point to take into consideration is the flow of the rising of the flood. It is quite low in Paris. It takes 1 week to reach each level. So it gives us some time to get prepared, but the last phase is quite quick. The flood protection plan at the BNF describes the technical facilities, specifies the early warning systems at all levels of floodings for each site, the organization of in case of a flood, and the measures of protection of the buildings. This document is drafted by the Department of Technical Resources, responsible for the building management, and the emergency preparedness and response plan for the collections is drafted in a separate document by the coordinator affected at the conservation department. So this document consists of different scenarios of securing the collection according to different levels of floodings. It is to be triggered by the crisis management cell. So only the crisis management cell is authorized to decide whether we must evacuate the collections or not. So we have 3 main sites at the National Library, very close to the river Seine. The most recent site, built in the 90s, it's the François Mitterrand site. There is a historical site here, very close to the river too, in a building built in the 17th century, and the Richelieu site, which is the most ancient. It is actually the previous, the most ancient library, most ancient site for the National Library of France. So here are pictures of the 3 buildings I will be presenting you. My presentation will present the strategies adapted to these 3 different buildings. I will present you the adaptation strategies for each building, the mitigation measures that have been taken for each building, and I will focus on the evacuation measures and the means prepared for the Arsenal site, this side on the left, because these measures and the means that we have prepared can be very easily duplicated in all type of libraries in the same situation. So here is the situation of the arsenal site, very close to the river, and a picture of its inside the building. So the Arsenal Library is one of the National Library's Parisian sites. It is situated next to the river. Since its origin, the library has been located in this building, a historic building dating from the 17th century. The sumptuous interiors of the apartments from the 17th and the 18th century are partly classified as a historical monument. In the 1960s, the basement was the only place where a repository could be accommodated, of course. 3 linear kilometers of precious documents are still kept in this repository in the basement. According to the plan, to the protection plan, this repository could be prone to flooding from the river overflowing or rising groundwater tables. Due to its imbricated history with the building, the collection has to be kept on site. So, yes, the situation is very different on the François Mitterrand site, a building built in the 1990s. In this building along the Seine banks, the BNF covers an area of 7 hectares. The complex is composed of 6 parts with 4 high-rise buildings, a podium made up of 7 basement levels, a forecourt, and an interior garden, and 3 levels of car park. Repositories are distributed in the towers and in the podium over 4 stories. The lowest level is 20 meters 50, a few meters below the groundwater table, whose level fluctuates between 22 meters and 29 meters. The podium is thus in permanent contact with water, as you can see on this slide. The building is made watertight by a 1,000-meter long wall made of concrete that rests on the watertight geological disposal and runs along the whole perimeter of the building. With a height reaching 30 meters, it rises the level reached by the 1910 flood, plus 60 centimeters. This wall is 65 centimeters and provides the core protection against water. There are seals at these sections. Seals referred to as a water stop ensure the leak proofness of the junctions of each panel of the wall. Dewatering wells and rainwater collection systems were created along the construction of the building. These pits are connected by a drain channel that runs the interior around the interior garden. So you can see here the wall, and the water can, if we have penetration of water, it will run along the wall and will be conducted below the garden here in through the drains. So this network is very crucial for the protection of the site. The division of space inside the building also contributes to the mitigation of risks for the collection, repositories being separated from the concrete wall by large corridors. So here you can see the wall. Here there is technical space. here there is another space where we can circulate, and here are the repositories. So you have several meters from the walls to the repositories. And the reading rooms are here. The Richelieu site is further from the river. It wasn't flooded in 1910. The river stopped here, but it is exposed to electric shortage and also to pipe burst, especially in the basement. So here I will present you the mitigation measures and the means that have been prepared in each site. So on the François Mitterrand site, different levels of means are defined to protect the collection from flooding. We first want to prevent water from entering the building, avoid direct contact of water with the collections, and withdraw the water. So plug drains are prepared to be put in place in the event of during the alert phase to prevent sewer backup. This is what you have here in the picture. These are inflatable pipe plugs to be inserted inside the pipes. Each pipe plug is kept in a referred box with its compressed air cylinder. And car parks are equipped with watertight doors to avoid the penetration of water inside the repositories. So you remember the view before, where I showed you the walls and the circulating corridors. So here is the circulating corridor. This is the wall, the door that will lead to the repositories. So we here have, so to protect repositories from potential water inflow, cofferdams are pre-positioned close to the door, across close to the door access to the repositories. So this is what I'm talking about. This equipment is composed of several elements: guideways in tempered steel, 31 aluminium interlocking panels, 50 centimeters high, with full-length handles to provide fast handling, and compartments for the storage of the interlocking panels, 60 centimeters high, fixed near the door. So where cofferdams could not be installed, flood sacks will help derive the water and avoid the water penetration inside the repositories. We also have the pumping stations for wastewater and the pumps of the rainwater collector systems to ensure the evacuation of excess water from the crawl space to the outside. These high volume pumps have a cumulated capacity of 600 cube meters per hour. And a set of mobile pumps are powered by a generator to complete this equipment. As a preventive measure, we also have bought folded crates to able to in case we need to evacuate collections. So we have 500 of these crates prepared in case of flooding, and they cannot be used for any other needs. At the Arsenal site, the situation is completely different. We don't have the means of protections, and we want to be able to evacuate the 4 kilometers, the 4 linear kilometers of collection that are kept in the repository in the basement. So this is a picture of the collections inside the repository. The collections So the collections have been rehoused in permanent boxes to hasten the collection of collections if needed. These boxes are made of stiff cardboard to allow the moving of collections half shelf by half shelves. So instead of removing items, the collections items per items, we will remove half shelf per half shelves. So these boxes are open at the front. So they do not restrict the retrieval of collections for communication purposes. So these are the boxes. In the case of an emergency, we close them with a lid, and the lids are kept in the case, in the basement. This is a picture of an evacuation that was implemented in 2016. So avoiding the retrieval one by one and the reboxing during the alert phase, valuable time is gained and handlings are reduced. The 2016 and 2018 floods have given us the opportunity to test this means and to estimate the time required to move the collections, either by internal staff or by carriers. In the event of a flood alert, the decision of relocation can be taken according to the water ground table fluctuations and the time required for the relocation of collections to a safe place. But this can only be achieved provided that power is supplied for the safety of people and for the use of the lift, essential to reach the fallback spaces in the upper floors. So we also have a power generator to complement this equipment. And there is a non-call duty included in the contract with the lift maintenance. And of course, we also have a call on duty for the staff at the library. So I would like to now focus on these boxes and how we prepared this emergency plan. So the board selected is a solid board with a thickness of 13 millimeters. Its density is higher than 7. The construction of the boxes is done by riveting. The number of rivets is calculated to strengthen the boxes because they will have to support the weight of boxes on 3 levels. The rivets have been placed on the outer face of the boxes to avoid any risk of abrasion when documents are fetched for readers. And it was important to achieve the best conditions for accessibility. So to avoid any additional manipulation for the staff when fetching books, the front faces of the boxes are left open, as I said earlier. During evacuation, the boxes would be turned face up so that the books are oriented with their front edges towards the bottom of the box, and the lids would be put on the boxes during the evacuation phase. So this is the lid put on the box during the evacuation phase, and the picture of the box of the lids in the storage room. This repository in the basement is very conventional for the library, where the holdings, mainly comprising standard format books, quarto and octavo, are kept on shelves that are 1 meter in length. So the homogeneity of the materials allowed us for the idea of gathering the documents in large units. These units are large 4-sided books in order to reduce the weight of the boxes and facilitate handlings during an evacuation. The content of each shelf has been distributed between 2 boxes. You must be aware that the homogeneity of formats is only relative, and we had to consider different height to avoid and we restricted these different heights to 4. This was to avoid a complete readjustment of the shelves and to limit and also for financial matters. We wanted to avoid budget extra budget for these materials. So we had to prepare the plan of the repository. This is the plan of all shelves. We have here the number of shelves for each row, and here the number of boxes for each size. So we have used celloderm. So I said, so it is a cardboard that is stable for 100 years time. And for the lid, we use polypropylene that is stable for 30 years. So the boxes were mounted and assembled by rivet that you can see here on the outer face. The numbering is also very important. The traceability of collections is crucial in an evacuation phase in order to identify any possible losses, and also after the crisis to enable a rapid return of the collections to their initial location. For this purpose, all the boxes have been labeled with an identification number. The call number is not appropriate for use in an emergency situation. Instead, the identification number of the boxes is a combination of characters relating to the location of the box in the repository. So here you have the format, here the number, and here the number of here the location number of the shelf. So this number combines the size of the item, the name of the font, the number of the row of stacks, and the number of the intermediate shelf. The identification numbers of the boxes are part of an overall tracking system that combines the layout of the repository, the mapping of the holdings in their original place, and the list of the shelf numbers. The system is intended to permit an evacuation of your holdings in no particular order. So it allows for the arrangement of the collections in remote locations according to the physical constraints of the rooms. Their return to their original place is facilitated with no possibility for error. As a result, the task of relocation could be given to an outside company under the supervision of librarians. And of course, when we evacuated these boxes in 2016, we realized they were quite heavy, not too heavy, but when you evacuate dozens of boxes, after a while you are very tired when you are not trained for this kind of activities. So we would consider the evacuation and the return of collection by an outside company. So this system allows for any possible rearrangement of the repository in the future. If you want further details, you can, for the flood protection plans at the National Library, you have here the references, but of course I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Celine. This was really valuable input to this webinar. Now I would like to introduce to you Tiago Cesar da Silva, who has over 15 years of experience and served as an archive technician and as a conservator at the National Archive of Brazil. Tiago has excelled in various roles, including leading the Cultural Heritage Risks Management team and serving as the Collection Preservation Coordinator for both analog and digital materials. So please, I know that it's still very early in Brazil now, but please, Tiago, this virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Janela. Good morning, greetings from Brazil. It's 7 p.m. a.m. here. Firstly, I would like to thank you for the invitation and congratulate the Federation on the event. I would also like to greet all my colleagues and everyone watching. It is important to highlight that risk management of cultural heritage is a tool. And like any tool, you need to learn how to use in the best way. Usually, I give slightly longer presentations about this methodology, presenting a case study, but today we will do a compact way and with great focus on the specific deterioration agents. It's water, of course. Let's start with a simple question. What is risk? Risk is uncertainty. It can be positive, for example, if you play the lottery, you take the risk of not winning, but you also take the risk of winning. Or focusing on the topic is a negative risk, something bad happens, do some event. In relation to our topic today, risk can be negative, the odds of something bad happening to an event. Within this is mind. What is risk management? It is the set of precautions we take to either prevent events or minimize their consequences if necessary. There are two definitions. These two definitions are standards in the ISO. It's in the presentation. When you implement a risk management process in your collection, you first need to define your objectives. What do you want to achieve? The first step in this case is to know your institution and your collection. For example, in a collection from a medical university, items directly related to medicine tend to be more valuable than those more superficially related to that field. Some laws are different depends on the type of collection. A publicly governed archive is ruled by different laws than a library. When you have a real idea of everything that can help you in building your plan, the more information you have, the more complete your management will be. This procedure of knowing your institutional internal process in depth and what are the valuable items you have under your care will allow you to prioritize what is important to you. These are the main aims of managing risks of cultural heritage. It's a management instrument, is a comprehensive view of the different types of risk to property, action priorities and allocation of resource, integrate and sustainable strategies, and intersectoral and institutional collaboration. This is an object picture of risk management for cultural heritage. Stability contest, risk identification, risk analysis, risk evaluation, and risk treatment. Each item has its function, which we cannot place one above the other, and none of them is more important than the other. Each item has its own process discussed when preparing it. When you talk about cultural heritage, these are the 10 agents of deterioration that we want to avoid. Physical forces, thieves and vandals, fire, water, pests, pollutants, light, incorrect temperature, incorrect relative humidity, and dissociation. It's important to realize that each agent correlates with the others. If we were to do an exercise, we could take any item and relate it to another. We have the most obvious one, like fire and water, or humidity and pests, but we have the less clear ones, such as physical force and dissociation, which can happen in the bookshelf collapse, for example. Today, we will obviously focus on water as an agent of deterioration. On the screen, we have some examples of consequences arising from a water accident, but there are the others such as delamination, efflorescence, streakage in the case of fabric of leather, corrosion of metals, and so forth. On this slide, we have a table analyzing the detection agent. What is spoilage agent? What is effect? What can it happen? How much of the collection is affected? How soon or how often can it happen? The methodology is to create one table for each agent according to the reality of each institution and their correspondence and individual solution proposals. Once the tables are assembled, we can convert them to that we call the ABC table. This table is constructed using it is A, how often or how long it can be occur. B, what is the loss or value of the affected item? And C, how much of the collection was affected? Using the table I already showed you, we can present the risks, previously subjective, very clearly for the general management, or rather to whoever manages the institution money. When we work with priceless items, so it's not possible put value on what we have. So all the money spent on risk management preparation is no longer a cost. Much on the contrary, it becomes an investment. And as most managements understand numbers, nothing better can a table with the number of possible risks and impacts in order to negotiate investments increase in prevention. When we talk about risk treatment, these are the 5 stages: avoid, block, detect, response, recover. Let's talk about a little each one of these. This item seems pretty obvious, but sometimes the obvious also needs to be said. We take the simplest precautions, such as not placing collections under pipes, to the most complex ones, such as working in partnerships to build or adapt or properly prepare storage building, whether it consists of the location or even its maintenance routines. In the picture, it's not so good to see them. Sorry about that. When I changed to another program, I'm lost some images. We sent an example of damage caused by river floodings due to intense rain in the city of Petrópolis in the state of Rio de Janeiro in 2022. The water reached 2 meters in high in front of the place. Their library underground, they basically lost everything they had. Blocking occurrences also requires involvement from the other levels of management. Having weather information in the area where we know there is a risk of flooding is important as well, as having a team prepared to be called when necessary, and also have material available to be used, including the most basic ones such as gloves, masks, mops, squeegees, buckets, even the most complex ones such as humidifiers, ladders, and others. The image above is from a training carry 2019, carrying out training helps a lot, as well as having material available and as immediately as possible. This is an image from a storage in the National Archives of Brazil. Some sutras are covered with tarpaulin because we know there are some leaks. And we already have some buckets waiting because we know that, where it rains. So it's a part of work routine to check each storage to see if any new leaks have appeared or if the maintenance attempt has been successful. Work routines for detection are crucial And as important was as quick communication with all teams, whether cleaning, build maintenance, or even the collection management team. At this point, it's helped a lot having an environmental monitoring system to quickly identify where there is a sudden change of humidity, which is an indicator of water in the environment. This response must be as brief as possible. Do you remember the rain I mentioned a little earlier? So we went there to another library in the city to make the rescue. And having a prepared team is important, a team that knows what they have to do and has to do, and it has to be done quickly. Stop the water when possible in the first step of all. After that, it's necessary to remove the water either by pumping or manually with mops. Maintaining air circulation is important at first, and then gradually try to adjust the ideal temperature and humidity. Well, to recover, you must first, if possible, know what was lost. It's not always possible, I understand. The first reaction is to save what you can. But with the prioritization process, we need to know exactly what we have. For this reason, it is also important that we always have an updated inventory of what we have in our collections. I'm heading towards to end here. I think I think I was a little quick, but if you want to delve deeper into the topic, I recommend reading the construction of this tool on the IFLA website. It's free and it's a very objective manual. In Brazil, we'll have a series of publications of the topic. I may even send some links later if you wanted, but I would obviously highlight the publication of National Archives of Brazil, institution to which we applied to do in the first cycle from beginning to end. We only have the Portuguese version, but you can get the idea as well. And finally, I thank everyone again and leave my contact details. Feel free to write me if it will be a pleasure to help if I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiago. That was really interesting that you shared with us. And we have one question which we will address later at the questions and answers. And now I would like to present our another speaker. And we have here Maria Luisa Russo. She's an expert in preservation, conservation, management of archive and library heritage with a long-standing experience on cultural heritage within crisis areas, specifically in West Africa and the Middle East. In Mali, she serves as field coordinator for the University of Hamburg Center for the Study of Manuscript Cultures and the Amalia Association. She will present to us weather and water-related hazards affecting written artifacts, the case of Mali. Please, Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Jasna, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation, and my greetings to all the participants and colleagues. It is my pleasure to have the opportunity to present in frame of this webinar focused on emergency management my experience on the written heritage of Mali. Written cultural heritage in Mali is of different kinds. Indeed, the most renowned collections are the manuscript libraries. And I'm sure that the name of Timbuktu is the city that makes many of us immediately think about manuscript collections and libraries. However, written and handwritten artifacts have a widespread presence in the country, and mostly as private libraries. And there are several types of institutions have quite a outstanding presence of private libraries and some governmental institutions. The Institut des Hautes Études et des Recherches Islamiques Ahmed Baba de Timbuktu, that you can see in the picture in the center, is the governmental institution in charge of the preservation and research on manuscripts. And there are also private libraries, as I told, not only in Timbuktu, but in other places in Mali, like the one that you see on the right, that is in Jenne, in the Mopti region, so in the central part of Mali. The National Library in Bamako has, that is the capital, has a primary focus on print resources, both books and periodicals. And finally, the National Archives, also in Bamako, preserve documents and archival fonts of different kinds. In this presentation, I will focus mostly on handwritten artifacts and manuscripts. And their peculiarities are manifold. As witnesses of the intellectual scholar activity and network in the past centuries in West Africa, the manuscripts date approximately from the 15th to the 20th century, with a large predominance of 18th and 19th centuries onwards items. They are written in Arabic script that include not only the Arabic language, but also local languages written in Arabic script. Texts are primarily of religious, devotional kind, but also texts of history, poetry, and other topics can be found, as well as documents such as letters and contracts. Mali's cultural heritage has been, and to some extent, it is still exposed to various risks, both of natural and man-made kind. Many of you maybe remember the conflict of 2012 that led to the damage and even destruction of a certain part of Timbuktu's cultural heritage, as you can see in the image, which were exactly some of the manuscripts from the Institut Ahmed Baba. This is a conflict-related damage that the heritage in Mali is threatened also by climate and natural events, on which I will focus on this presentation, keeping in mind that often the two components are related, mankind damage and natural damage. If you consider that Mali, that is in the sub-Saharan part of Africa, in West Africa, in the sub-Saharan area, it maybe seem unusual to talk about floods, because you think of a hot, arid climate that characterizes the country. This is largely true, but the climatic features of the country and the distribution of rainfall and rainy seasons tell us that the situation is more complex. If we have a closer look at the climate map, we see that Mali includes 3 climate zones. The warm desert region in the north, marked in red, the hot semi-arid region in the center, and the tropical savanna marked in blue in the southern region. So we have the 3 climatic zones in the country. Such a geography shows a regular increase in rainfall and in the duration of rainy season from north to south. Rainfall range from 200 in the north to 1,200 millimeters rainfall in the south. And the longest rainy season is from June to September in the south. If we widen the overview on the hydrogeological characteristics of the country, we see that the Niger River, which crosses the country, undergoes a significant increase during the rainy season, which facilitates navigation, irrigation, and creates in the central area of Mali the so-called Inel Delta of Niger. agroecological map of Mali show us the interaction of the three components that I mentioned: the climate, with the three areas, the presence of the inner delta of Niger, and the level of rainfalls during the year. Where you see that the different places that I have just mentioned, such as Timbuktu, that is in the central area, and Bamako, are in a different climatic area. And this is a component that has to be taken in serious consideration when talking about floods, water, and the impact of water on the conservation of written items. During the rainy season, floods can happen, and their impact on communities and cultural heritage is different, not only depending on the climatic zone that the impact, but also, of course, on the organization of the territories, with a difference between the urban and rural areas. In the capital, Bamako, a long and intense rain season can often result in flooding of the streets. The problem that is, of course, due to the intensity of rains, but also to some lacks in maintenance of the canals in the city areas that allow the water to stay in the streets. However, many of the libraries that have been working over the years are located in rural areas, such as Jenne and Timbuktu, and in the Mopti region, in the central areas. And you see here the flooding that have affected the central area of Mali in 2022, close to Jenne, where also there have been displaced communities because of the floods. So we have a diversity of climatic situations in Mali, geographical configuration, and finally also types of library. The typical setting of library collections in family libraries and in private, therefore in private homes, means that sometimes also the preservation conditions and environments are not totally appropriate. Beyond my personal experience, the manuscripts themselves speak well, are clear witnesses of what happened over the decades in the places where they have been preserved. We see water stains, inks that have been washed out, sometimes molds, and sometimes often blocks of sheets that have been stuck together because of the damage of direct water and permanence in a wet state. One of the problems that we often faced were the manuscripts that came to the library in very problematic conditions, with clear evidence of this water damage, and with additional issues created by the severe changes in hygrometric situation in the storage rooms, so that from the hot and humid environment of the rainy season to the very hot and dry environment of the other periods. A cycle that has entailed the extreme fragility of the paper, that is often of industrial paper of the 19th century, and therefore has already preservation problems for the kind of raw materials from which it was made, and let's say the preservation environment worsens this problem of paper fragility. The water content of paper measured with the Aquaboy equipment showed such changes over seasons, and while an excess of water led to the risk of mold, as it often happened, too little water content was one of the factors of the extreme fragility of paper, because the material lost its flexibility. all these components lead us to talk about the theme of water, the topic of water, in a more comprehensive approach on climate management for library and archive collections. Addressing the issue of emergency and conservation in general in these areas also means addressing the problem of the skills of local staff, which is the keys for ensuring the durability of whatever interventions can it be conservation treatment or preservation activity, preventive measures, as well as emergency preparedness. One of the key elements of the Center for the Study of Manuscript Cultures action in Mali is the cooperation with local organizations and staff. And this has been the case since 2013, when CSMC supported the preservation of Timbuktu manuscripts that have been moved from Timbuktu to Bamako. In support to the NGO's Savamad Seed project, which was funded by the German Federal Foreign Office and the Gerda Henkel Foundation, has made it possible to support urgent measures to safeguard the cultural heritage that was moved to the city. The work that has been carried out with the staff was quite wide, encompassing the conservation treatments, the monitoring of storage rooms, and all these, of course, framed in a training plan that could ensure the durability of these interventions. The conservation treatments on damaged items included the action of detaching the leaves that had been stuck one to the other because of water. And this is a very time-consuming activity and very delicate that was done in several steps. First of all, providing air circulation between the text block and the covers, and then between each individual sheets. And in case this treatment was not successful, the further step was the treatment with the humidity chamber that was made on site with this basic equipment that was provided. The training was also carried out. The training was carried out over the years in the frame of that project, and afterwards also in collaboration with the Amali Association and with a project funded by Ali Foundation that allowed to go further into training both on conservation and prevention and emergency preparedness. This component of preventive conservation was, as I said, part of the training, also with specific practical sessions involving the measurement not only of environmental conditions in the storage rooms, but also the water content of paper, as I mentioned. In 2020, a wider scale project was launched in collaboration with UNESCO in Timbuktu, which made it possible to bring these topics I mentioned into an official training program in collaboration with the Institut Ahmed Baba de Timbuktu, so the governmental institution in charge of the preservation and research on manuscripts. Since the topic of training of local staff was crucial, and also the equipment for ensuring appropriate preservation and emergency preparedness. We established this training program. Upon the consideration that the staff of the library had an uneven training level in this field, since traditionally curators and catalogers had education and training mostly in the field of Arabic language, literature, and cataloging, but not really on preservation topics. And on the other hand, the conservation staff in the lab could have an improvement of their skills in this field of preventive conservation. The training program that has been developed include a lot of different topics, ranging from the history of collections to digitization and identification of languages and scripts. But focusing on if we focus on the topic that is one of this webinar about water and water management in libraries, we had two classes on the basics of biology, chemistry, and physics, involving the understanding of the effects of direct water and moisture on the collections, and a specific class on the climate control in the environment, exploiting the structural and the structural characteristics of buildings hosting libraries and archives. Passive climate control through building characteristics and the regular inspection and check of buildings was part of this training, as well as the equipment and supplies that would be needed both for the preservation, for the regular daily preservation, and for emergency measures in case of events. This is from the technical point of view, and the further observation of the project and on the meaning of this training with UNESCO and Institute Ahmed Baba was to combine, as I said, technical work on written cultural heritage with the topics of peacekeeping. The project was funded by the government of Norway through the MINUSMA Trust Fund. MINUSMA was the multi-dimensional integrated mission in Mali, the peacekeeping mission in Mali, and combined the dual demand of cultural heritage with the one of societies in a crisis area such as Timbuktu, where cultural heritage and the manuscript, also for their symbolic role, could play a role in building a better and more peaceful future for the city. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maria Luisa. And now we will continue with our program with our colleague from Czech Republic, so Petra Vavrova. She's a conservation scientist with 21 years of experience in the field. And since 2010, Petra has held the position of Director of the Collection Preservation Division at the National Library of Czech Republic. In this role, she has particularly focused on the national program for the protection of library collection. She will present to us managing the emergency plan during and after floods in Czech Republic. So this presentation was recorded. So please, Damiana, can you start the recording?
Dear colleagues, hello from Prague, and let me introduce activities of Collection Preservation Division of the National Library of the Czech Republic in management of emergency plan during and after floods in Czech Republic in last more than 2 decades. In our library and in the Czech Republic and also in Visegrad 4 group libraries and other cultural institutions also. It is inspiration for your libraries and like a resource of information and ideas where to start, how to start discuss about emergency plan, some emergency steps, for example, with low amount of money. I would like to share our practical experience, give you some recommendation and share our next plans. First, I would like to introduce our team. Collection Preservation Division is located in organizational structure under Library Collections and Services, and the division consists of 3 departments: Development and Research Laboratories, Department of Restoration, and Department of Preventive Conservation. We are responsible for complex preservation and conservation and care of the physical condition of library collections in general. Our activities focus on monitoring climate conditions in our storage facilities. We deal with individual and mass conservation of library collections, bookbinding and other preservation activities. We plan and implement preventive measures against accidents and natural disasters. We collaborate with libraries, institutions, and professional establishments, both in the Czech Republic and abroad. In our division, we have 21 specialists from different professions. We have conservators, chemists, conservation scientists, bookbinders, microbiologists, climatologists, and also more than 70 people working part-time with us on the project. It is not easy to take care of more than 7.5 million of library examples. We provide also coordination, methodological advisory and consultancy services for more than 5,000 libraries in the Czech Republic. And now back to floods. There were several large floods in the Czech Republic, for example in July 1997 and the largest in August 2002. Then there were local floods of a small scale in the territory of the Czech Republic. However, as a result of these floods, there was extensive damage not only to library collections, but also to archival documents, museum objects, and others. Here you can see what such damage looked like. Many of you know and have experienced it. And now I would like to describe what steps were taken in Czech Republic to save library collections damaged in this way. After floods hit Prague in 2002, a multifunctional vacuum chamber for drying and disinfection or disinsection of books and paper documents was developed and supporting by Mellon Foundation and Ministry of Culture of the Czech Republic. It is the result of research by a number of experts in the Czech Republic who tested book drying methods, and the result is this chamber and gentle drying method. We use different kinds of drying and safe methods with different types of pressure and temperature values. The total volume is less than 3 cubic meters. The design of the chamber enables the following interventions: vacuum drying, vacuum freeze drying lyophilization, drying in a controlled atmosphere, for example, temperature between 25 and 60 degrees Celsius, and relative humidity between 5 and 6%. Also disinfection, oxygen-free atmosphere, disinsection, and other steps. We still help other cultural institutions after floods and other crises to dry their wet books or other materials. Here you can see the principle of fixing books. Based on the positive experience gained during the drying of books after the floods in 2002, the books are arranged during drying in columns composed of unit sandwiches. You can see sandwich composition and sensor placement. Each sandwich consists from the top of pair of heating tiles, absorbent paper, for example, filter paper, old newspapers, etc., non-woven fabric based on polypropylene or polyethylene, book and no-woven fabric, and absorbent paper. That the result of the drying for books is very safe and books are very flat. We also developed safe drying method of wet books in vacuum packaging machine. Wet books are wrapped like English bacon or cheese in plastic films together with absorbent material like paper. The space is evacuated and left to be stored for several days. Then the book is checked, its humidity, and possibly repacked and vacuumed also. It is a very gentle drying method, but time-consuming and laborious. It is using diffusion between wet and drying porous materials. We developed Czech guidelines for building emergency plan to inspire libraries in the Czech Republic to prepare it and to have it. In the project, supported by Vyšehrad 4 Foundation, we prepared 5 languages specialized dictionary, and later we prepared guidelines for emergency plan, and its in English version is on the web page of the project. You can find it there. We also help cultural institutions in crisis and doing first aid. The Collection Preservation Division has prepared first aid sets for both people and books. The first aid kit produced in the Czech Republic is a complete disaster preparedness kit. The kit has been created in collaboration with highly experienced conservators, curators, librarians, and collection managers. The kit is designed to be used primarily by a 2-person team and provides a range of items to prevent further damage, document damage, and the cleanup. All institutions can modify this kit. Libraries can customize these sets for their own needs and situations. Ministry of Culture is supporting in a grant project buying these kits for libraries. And here you can see that the location of the kit is labeled on the door in the depository. The Collection Preservation Division has also prepared a first aid circle with easy-to-follow instructions for first aid after different kinds of damage during various types of disasters. and different kinds of materials. Very important is to do most important steps during first 48 hours after accident or disasters. It was inspiring in first at Circle from ICOM and Blue Shield for all kinds of museum objects. This first at wheel is designed for first at for books, different types of library collections in case of different types of accidents and disasters. Our activity to share with you to help libraries in V4 area. In the early days of the pandemic, our activities were focused on the initial steps libraries should take. We received a huge amount of questions about risk and activity of the virus. Finally, we have prepared this poster and it answers the basic questions. What to do, how to do it, and how we can work in libraries without risk during the pandemic time. It is an easy to understand recommendation on how to handle books upon check-in during the pandemic and how to take care about our colleagues. We have also been in contact with other colleagues from our other countries and other libraries. We have translated this poster in few languages in cooperation with colleagues from Slovakia, Poland and other countries. During last 10 years, we have been thinking about building a mobile workplace for first aid in the event of disasters or accidents for libraries. Deal with the intervention on site with all the necessary equipment. Now the need for this workplace is becoming even more important. We are now preparing the construction of such a workplace with donors from Czech Republic, and we hope that by the end of this year it will serve to save the written culture heritage in the Czech Republic, but also in other European countries where it is urgently needed. And our next plans? We also plan some emergency plan trainings to train what to do in crisis or disasters to help to save written culture heritage. So, it was a brief presentation of experiences and solutions to floods and damage to library collections in the Czech Republic. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
So that was our last presentation. I would really like to thank all the presenters who were prepared to share their knowledge at this webinar. And if you have some questions, I saw that the ones that were put into the question and answers were already answered. There were only 2 questions. One was for Claire McGuire, that yet and long are complicated. Use the 3-word system instead. From Paul Harrison, the UK conservator, and Claire answered to Paul. She thanked for the tip. And when working with the Cultural Emergencies team at UNESCO, they ask for geo-coordinates, but any specific information that can be shared is good. Some libraries have similar names, and it becomes difficult for UNESCO to carry out satellite imagery analysis. So anything to make this go easier and more accurately is appreciated. And there was another question from Dominic Lenarčić to Tiago Cesar da Silva. So what is this association as a factor of risk for library materials? And he answered that the biggest risk is precisely not knowing what they have. For example, a rare specimen within a general collection. So are there any other questions? So if not, I would really like to thank all who help with preparation of this event, colleagues from IFLA and my colleagues from the National and University Library, Tomasz, Damiana, Polona, Natasha, and Mai for their support. And now I would like to ask to give us some final remarks, Elizabetta Zonca. She has been working in libraries for 20 years, and presently she is a special collection curator in the Architecture Academy Library, Université della Svizzera Italiana, Swiss. Currently, she serves on Rare Books and Special Collections Standing Committee of IFLA. Her research interests are in library history, management of personal funds, and history of paper making. Please, Elizabetta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jasna. My greetings goes to all the participants and colleagues. I want to say, before I start with final consideration, I would like to thank Stephanie Stillo, Chair of Rare Books and the Special Collection section of IFLA, for enthusiastically accepting the collaboration proposal made by Ornella Foglieni, Chair of Preservation and Conservation section, and all the Rare Books and Special Collections and the committee members, in particular Fabiano Cataldo de Azevedo, for their help. A special thanks goes to Jasna Malešič and the National University and Library of the Republic of Slovenia staff for their precious support. They permit us to go live today, so thank you very much. And at last, I would like to thank the speakers who have presented their studies and experiences today. They told us about cases where floods have put people's lives and cultural heritage at risk. And their experiences, both with regard to the preparation of intervention measures and their revision, teach us two things. The first is that having a reference standard is essential to build capacity for preparedness in the event of natural disasters. To have the necessary points of reference to rely on in order to react in a very dramatic situation. The second point is that we must be very flexible. Nature is often unpredictable. We must respect it and try to get to know it. But often it is man who, with his intervention, creates new scenarios from which previously unimaginable consequences arise. So we cannot foresee everything, but we can study and update our knowledge. And obviously, share what we learn is a key point. We have seen that floods, unfortunately, affects different areas of the world, different types of libraries and of cultural institutions, and different types of materials. We have heard about books, manuscripts, archives. Protecting rare and special resources is imperative in order to preserve the memory of our past and provide those memories for future generations. But let not forget how important books are. Recent resources and libraries themselves are a key part of the communities that find here a source of recreation, education, and an inspiration to build their future. Therefore, we as librarians must continue to discuss, grow, and improve, if I may say, as we have done today, relying on best practices and being actively part of a network of libraries, of climate institutions, able to help each other, referring to IFLA and to the tools it makes available, because those can be a significant resource. Next, I would like to briefly recall the upcoming events organized by Preservation and Conservation section, because they can be important in the perspective of learning and growth for each of us. The first one is a webinar that will be held on 1st March 2024, titled Binding as Conservation, Practices, Evolution and Challenges for the Future. And the second one is a midterm meeting of the IFLA section with library theory and research, preservation and conservation, school libraries sections, and with the special interest group in library history and Relindel, that will be held in Rome and the Vatican City between 22 and 23 March 2024. I'm at the end of my final remarks. I want to thank you all for your attention. And I give back the floor to Jasna.
Thank you very much, Elizabetta. I think that we are finished. We have finished all the presentations and the concluding remarks. So hopefully I see you at the next webinar.